how you start a TED Talk matters. You have to get it right. So about 4 weeks ago, I was really thinking about how to start this talk when my son came up to me and handed me this quote: "Once you choose hope, anything is possible." And I thought, wow, that's it. Once you choose hope, anything is possible. I had to start tonight's talk, and Jake had done all the heavy lifting. Well, that's one way you could look at it. But in truth, I wasn't just sitting around one day. I was reclining on a white medical table, waiting for my first radiation treatment for recently diagnosed breast cancer. And Jake didn't actually hand me that note. It was written on a small scrap of paper taped to the top of the radiation machine. But as a person who doesn't believe in coincidences, I believe that Jake had a hand in handing me that note, handing me that quote. And no, I don't walk around wearing rose-colored glasses either. Those were actually knocked off and crushed on June 25th, 2017. But I do believe in the power of reframing, and I do believe in hope. You see, I'm a mom of 2 boys, Jake and Zane. I'm a really proud boy mom. And they, along with my husband Jeff, are my life. I also happen to be a social worker who's done a lot of work around trauma and understanding how to help people heal. So when I experienced my own trauma, I actually thought I had enough skills to be okay. But what I quickly discovered is that I would need a whole lot more. I would need to find hope. Hope has come to me in all shapes and forms. It has come to me in the knowledge that I know about trauma. Understanding what was happening to my brain and body in the initial months after my trauma helped me so much. And it also helped me to be able to connect and understand what was happening to my loved ones who had experienced the exact same trauma. You see, on June 25th, 2017, my 17-year-old son Jake was murdered. What's worse, he was killed by one of his childhood friends. His death has profoundly changed who I am and how I view the world. I've had the unfortunate opportunity to deeply understand traumatic loss and its impact. I've had the chance to find hope when I didn't think hope was possible. I've actually spent the last few years understanding how deep grief and sadness can exist in the exact same space as joy and gratitude. I could actually spend my time here talking with you tonight about the brain science of trauma, how trauma literally changes the way our brain and body functions. I could talk to you about how trauma survivors have a heightened fight, fight, or flees response, and how easily our trauma responses can be triggered. For example, for the first year after losing Jake, if I would wake up to sirens in the middle of the night, my heart rate would immediately start going up. And that was it, I wouldn't be sleeping the rest of the night. Or how just a few weeks ago, I was sitting in a meeting and I saw the word parole come across my text, and I immediately broke out in a cold sweat. Or how getting a cancer diagnosis is traumatic in and of itself, but when you couple that with traumatic loss, it becomes so much more. I could talk to you about the importance of mindfulness, meditation, exercise, eating healthy. All these things are true. Like when I started practicing daily gratitude after losing Jake, I would actually wake up feeling better. All these things are an important part of the healing process and something that all trauma survivors need to understand. But that's not what I actually want to share with you tonight. What I really want to talk to you about are the unexpected gifts that have come into my life as a result of losing Jake. You know, when I first started, after I lost Jake, I thought people would understand how to help me and help my family. But what I quickly discovered was that, in fact, most people do not know how to non-judgmentally help somebody through a traumatic situation. So I'm really grateful that the first gift that I was given was my voice. I've had to use my voice in ways I didn't think possible. I've had to use it to advocate for Jake, for justice for Jake in the legal system. I've had to use it with my younger son Zane in his school system, a school system where his brother was supposed to return to and where the kid who killed him was supposed to return. They had no idea how to help Zane through his trauma. I've had to use it in the place of business that I was working when I lost Jake, when I returned there. And I've had to use it with my own family and friends. One of the things I've learned in the last few years is that the most resilient trauma survivors I know have found their voice. They've learned how to advocate for themselves, set boundaries when they need to. Now don't get me wrong, setting those boundaries is one of the hardest things I've had to learn to do in the last few years. For example, I come from a really large, tight-knit family, and traditionally we would do everything together. If it was a holiday, we would get together. If it was a birthday, I mean, we would have monthly birthday parties. We would get together for no other reason than to eat tacos. We would get together a lot. And certainly, when tragedy struck our family, that was a time for us to gather. What I learned really quickly after losing Jake, though, was that I could no longer attend those family functions. I actually couldn't imagine being in that space with my whole family when one of my people was missing. I couldn't actually sit in that space with Zane when Jake wasn't next to him, because they're a package deal. It was way too hard for me. So really early on, I had to learn to really think about what was best for Jeff, Zane, and I. I had to learn how to lead with my heart. I would attend when I was able to, but I would gracefully decline when I just wasn't feeling it. And now, nearly 6 years later, I still lead with my heart and set the boundaries that I need to. Now, rest assured that I've lost people because of that as well, because boundaries are hard and people are at different spots in their lives, and so maybe they don't understand what's going on. But the more I've been able to set those boundaries, the healthier I've been. And if I could actually give trauma survivors one gift, it would be their voice. Having their voice, man, it's just a vital part of how we can be okay. We can save ourselves when we're really struggling. The second gift that I've been given is the gift of connection. So I can't even begin to tell you how many people have come into my life over the last few years just because I lost Jake. And what I really believe in my heart is that those people have been sent to me by Jake at just the right time. These are people who are now my lifelong friends. But what has also happened is relationships that I've had for so long have grown closer because of my trauma. One of the things that has really filled my heart up time and time again has been the way people have shown up for my family for no reason. You know, I can't tell you how many times I would just get a text from somebody just saying, hey, Jamie, I'm checking in on you. How are you guys doing? Or on certain anniversaries, Jake's birthday, or the day that he was killed, people would send me texts telling me ways that they had honored Jake. And those types of messages are the type of hope that we need when we've experienced trauma. What's really been amazing is how perfect strangers have stepped up to me and said, hey, I know your story, and I've been praying for you. Those strangers seem to show up on the days I need them most. One of the most important gifts and connections that I've been given in the last few years is from a group that I lovingly call the Boys. These are a great group of Jake's closest friends who experienced the exact same trauma that Jeff, Zane, and I did. And certainly, it's a trauma that none of us had experienced before. So when we first lost Jake and those boys started coming around, I actually made a promise to myself that I was going to show up for them any way they needed me to. Because it's my belief that in our society, we don't honor the grief process of men. We don't allow them to move through a process and heal. And so for me, it was really important that I just be present in their lives any way they needed me. But what's really been amazing is how they have shown up for us, how they continue to show up and show love for Jake and my family. They do things for us like the boys go golfing with my husband all the time. I mean, it's just an amazing gift. They come and sit and have dinner with us just so that they can have a space where they can catch up with each other, but also where they can share stories about Jake. And let me tell you what, there's nothing better than sitting in that circle with those boys and hearing them talk about the things that they did with Jake. Even though I'm pretty sure I'm not supposed to know some of those things that they did with him, it is a gift that they have given to me to share those stories with us. It's an honor for me to be a part of their journey, and they give me hope that Jake's memory will continue to live through them. And certainly, one of the biggest, most life-saving connections that have happened for me has been with other child loss survivors. When I first lost Jake, I actually needed to see how other parents were still breathing after losing a child. I needed to understand the different ways that they healed so that they could continue to be living, to be a part of their lives with their other loved ones. I needed to actually understand that joy could exist in my life again. And as soon as I healed enough, it was just as important that I give that gift back to other child loss survivors. Just a few months ago, I was speaking to a mother who had recently lost her oldest daughter, and she was sharing with me her fears about leaving her other 2 children out of her sight, for fear that, they wouldn't come back to her. When she said that to me, I'm telling you, I felt that connection deep in my soul. When I shared with her, that is normal, that fear is normal, and I can't even tell you how many nights for the first year I would wake up, go downstairs, and just check to make sure Zane was breathing. You could see the relief in her face. You know that saying, you only know if you know? That could not be more true than with child loss survivors. But you know what? When I was diagnosed with breast cancer in November, the exact same thing happened. I had a lot of loved ones around me to support me, but the moment I connected with one of my friends who was going through the exact same diagnosis as I was, it was like a sigh of relief. It was like I could breathe again. To connect with somebody who understands what you're going through, to help you know that you're not crazy, that your fears are normal, and that you're gonna be okay, that's a gift that all trauma survivors need. The last of the gifts that I'm gonna share with you today is the gift of empathy. Now, I know that sounds kind of crazy because I'm a social worker, and I'm sure hoping that I have some empathy if I'm going to do that job on a daily basis. So I definitely had empathy before I lost Jake, but what's happened since losing him is that I've discovered that empathy is actually a marker for me as to how well I'm doing. When I start to lose empathy, what happens is that anger, judgment, and sarcasm show up in my life. And when those things are going on, I know that I am really struggling and I need to do some specific things to get back to neutral, if you will. So one of the things that I always think about this when I talk about empathy is I think about times when we as a community have lost empathy. And unfortunately, the last 3 or 4 years have given us lots of opportunities to look at how people can lose empathy pretty quickly. I think about at the beginning of COVID, when the toilet paper was disappearing off the shelves. You remember how mad people were about the toilet paper disappearing off the shelves? People were crazy mad. I just couldn't believe the things that I would read online, the angry comments, but also from my friends and family who were cursing out people for taking all the toilet paper. And I just kept thinking, y'all, I don't know why people are taking all the toilet paper, but neither do they. None of us had lived through a pandemic. They were just doing the best that they could to survive in that moment. So if you think about that situation and you think about trauma survivors who are oftentimes going through anger, guilt, sadness, all these other big emotions, and you throw something in there that might just knock them off kilter a little bit, it's really easy for them to lose empathy. So one of the ways that I know to stay in a spot of empathy is that I really try and remind myself that I don't know what another person is going through. I don't know their stories. I don't know what's happened to them in the days, weeks, months, or years before I met them. Or actually, maybe I do know what happened to them, and I need to remind myself of that. I think about this a lot in my family. So you saw the picture of my family, and there's 3 of us in the same house. My husband, my son Zane, and me. All 3 of us experienced the exact same trauma. But we all 3 have very different trauma responses and very different ways of dealing with it. And sometimes I don't understand how or what they're doing, and certainly sometimes they don't understand how or why I'm acting a certain way. So we really practice a lot of grace and empathy in my house because we are all going through a different type of story. So let's all think about a time when you've lost empathy. I'm going to give you an example of one that I think most of us can connect to in this room. Think about a time when you've been driving down the road and somebody cuts you off. And I'll say for myself, on occasion when that happens, the wrong finger might show itself when someone cuts me off in traffic. So when that happens, it doesn't just end there for me. Now I'm angry, and now I'm saying, what is wrong with that person? How dare they do that to me? My day is ruined because of this person cutting me off in traffic. And I think about that. But on the day Jake was killed, My husband and I were at a family graduation in St. Louis. We live in Kansas City. My boys were still in Kansas City. We had to drive across the state from St. Louis to Kansas City to get to my family. I am quite certain that on that day, we drove faster than we should have, and that we cut a few people off. I'd also be willing to lay money that a few people probably showed us that finger that's not so very kind. But what if that person would have just stayed in a spot of grace? What if they would have just said in their mind, I wonder what happened to them? Because here's what happens when we lose empathy and we go straight to anger and judgment. We are releasing the chemicals in our body that are not healthy for us. We are triggering our fight, flight, or freeze responses at times when we don't want it to be triggered. So the more that we can stay in a spot of empathy and kindness, the better it is for our brain. And certainly for folks who've experienced trauma and have already got some changes going on with their brain, it helps their brains to heal in a great way. Now, let me say this. I don't always drive along calmly in traffic. I am human, and there are times when I notice that I have an elevated response to somebody cutting me off in traffic. But what I also noticed today is that I sure feel a lot better when I stay in a spot of grace, kindness, and compassion. One of the easiest ways that I know actually how to practice empathy and to keep our empathy at high levels is to practice kindness. When we practice kindness, we actually are releasing the good chemicals into our brain. I call them the love chemicals, but they're the same chemicals that get released when somebody gives us a hug, and it feels good. So when we practice kindness, we're releasing the good stuff into our brain. We think and talk a lot about random acts of kindness. Random acts of kindness are a vital part for all of us to be well, and they're the easiest things we can do. You know, just simply by doing something like opening the door for somebody when you go into the store, or complimenting your friend on the shirt that they're wearing today. One of my favorite easy ways to practice kindness is to get coffee for my son and just surprise him with it because he likes a good cup of coffee. Those are easy ways that we can practice random acts of kindness. But what I have found out in the last few years is that for me, practicing intentional acts of kindness have saved me. I can't even tell you how many times it's helped my brain to function better. So what do I mean by that? What's the difference? Well, for me, I know that there are certain times that I am at higher risk to have trauma responses, times when I am at higher risk to experience higher levels of sadness versus joy. One of those times is coming up very quickly. Y'all know Mother's Day is in May. For me, I never actually thought much about Mother's Day prior to losing Jake. But now it is a reminder to me that I'm a mother of two, missing one. From then until the end of June, I definitely experienced more sadness than joy. Remember, Jake was killed in June. So for me during that time period, I plan it out. I plan out my acts of kindness in a way to honor Jake and in a way to also give back to other people. So I do simple things like I buy a pack of Starbucks gift cards and I hide them in grocery stores and different stores around town for people to find them. Why Starbucks? Because Jake loved pumpkin spice lattes. Yes, both my boys were coffee lovers at a young age. So I do that simple little thing to honor him, but to just give joy to other people. I intentionally pick my phone up and text people who I haven't reached out to in a while, just to tell them I love them, to tell them how much they mean to me and my family. I'll go to Jake's favorite fast food place and buy the person behind me their lunch just because Jake liked spicy chicken sandwiches. Really simple things that trigger the right thing in my brain. The best thing about that for me is that I might just be triggering the right thing in someone else's brain at the same time. Maybe someone receives that act of kindness and it triggers hope for them. Remember, no coincidences. I'll never understand why Jake was taken from me, but I do believe he has a hand in the gifts that I've been given today. Rest assured, I'd give all those gifts back for one more second with my child. But since that's not an option, I'm sharing his gifts with you today. If that offers hope and healing to just one person, then mission accomplished. Because remember, when you choose hope, anything is possible.